talk about the NCAA tournament and Kentucky's last-second win again last night against Wisconsin. But I want to do that today. Today I want to talk about family and sports, and here's why. This past week, the New York Mets second baseman, Daniel Murphy, had a baby. His wife had a baby. He took time off to be with his wife at the birth of his first child. Major League Baseball has a paternity leave that allows players to take 3 days off to be with their spouse when they have a child. I think that's a great rule. I think it's wonderful that they allow these players to be with their family. They have a bereavement list that players can go on if there's a death in the family, which there should be. I mean, to me, family should come first. It always has. I've talked for years about my two sons who I raised. I'm divorced, raised my sons by myself. My sons always came first for me. They still do. They're 24 and almost 23 now. And that's just the way I am. Some people don't agree with that. As Mike Francesa and Boomer Esiason, talk show host in New York, and Boomer Esiason, of all people, who former NFL quarterback with the Jets and the Bengals, who has a son Gunnar who has a serious disease that he spent so much time, has a charity for him, and has done so many good things, criticized Daniel Murphy. Mike Francesa, the host at a very popular New York station, made the comments that he should not have been taking paternity leave and that he should have hired a nurse to take care of his wife. Now, where in the world does somebody make a comment like that, and why would he say that? And his comment is because they have unique jobs. Baseball players have unique jobs. And he said, I was really speaking to someone who has a job like a major league player like Murphy or someone like me who you have a unique job and you have the wherewithal to maybe afford care that some people may not. Stuff like that, then you get back to work. There is nothing more important to me than family. And before we get to John Wathan, my good friend who I worked for in 1990 when I was the Royals team psychologist when he was the manager, and I don't know, Duke, if you even know this, but Mr. K, who you and I both love very much, Ewan Kaufman, I had many, many conversations with him, and I had a conversation with him one time. We were talking about life and people, and he said, young man, I never met a man on his deathbed who wished he'd worked an extra day. They always told me they should spend more time with their family. And that stuck with me since 1990 when he had that conversation with me. John Wathan, thanks for joining me this morning.
You're welcome, Andy. Good to be with you. How are you doing?
I'm great. Haven't seen you in a while, but you sound the same.
Well, I've got the allergies working in the spring like normal, but I'm okay. I'm doing well. Still traveling around, seeing our minor league players, evaluating kids and instructing a little bit, which I love. You know, I had 18 years, I guess, in the big leagues, counting, managing, and playing and coaching, along with Boston and California a couple of years. So what I really love to do now, even more than watch the big league games, are the minor league games, because I get an opportunity to see kids, see them change from day to day and week to week, and see the smiles on their face when they try something that you tell them and it works. And I just really enjoy what I'm doing now, other than the travel. We have 6 minor league clubs, so I'm on the road quite a bit, but it's fun. I still enjoy baseball after being in professional ball 43 years now. So it's pretty neat when you can tell people you don't know what you're going to do when you grow up and have to get a real job.
Yeah, when are you going to get a real job, Duke? I mean, come on.
I decided at my age now, I think I'm beyond that and probably won't get a real job.
How old are you now?
64.
Okay. And you have 2 sons who both played baseball. You have they both. I believe they both managed as well, correct?
No, Derek, the one that's out of baseball now, he played 11 years in the minor leagues, didn't make it to the big leagues. Dusty played 14 years, including a couple weeks in Kansas City. And now he's managing his 6th year in Double-A with the Phillies in Reading, Pennsylvania.
Okay. How many grandchildren do you have?
And then Dina, of course, is still working for the Royals in media relations.
Right. Your kids all played sport. Dina played softball, right, growing up. So you have how many grandchildren now?
7.
7. You've almost got your own team.
Almost.
Okay. Yeah. You know, I'm biased. I spent a year working with you. I have the utmost respect for you. I think you understand baseball extremely well. We've spent hours talking about different things, about what I do and what you do. And let me ask your opinion on this. I mean, you're a former player. You played for years. You managed. You've been around the game. These comments by these two gentlemen, I mean, Boomer Esiason, I was really surprised to hear comments like that come out of his mouth. But Mike Francesa, to make a comment about Daniel Murphy, it's wrong that he took time off of work to see the birth of his child. What do you think about that? What's your opinion?
Well, the paternity leave is in place through Major League Baseball and their collective bargaining agreement for a reason. And it is the rules that I think a player gets 3 days off for paternity leave now. So for them to make those comments is kind of weird. Players do it all the time. Had it been somebody from the Baltimore Orioles or Minnesota Twins
or the Royals,
I doubt if it would have happened. But these guys are New York based, I imagine, and big market with the Mets. And so I think they made the comments without thinking it through. A lot of times on radio, I think your foot is inserted into your mouth sometimes before you think.
Well, you've been on radio for years as well. You've done all kinds of things.
Yeah, I've made huge mistakes along the way when you say something without really thinking it through, and I think that's what happened. One thing I will say though, Andy, the game has changed tremendously as far as and for the better, as far as people having an opportunity to go to funerals of loved ones and to be at the birth of their son or their daughter. Let me tell you a little story how it used to be. This is back in the 70s when I first got to the big leagues in Kansas City. When my wife, Nancy, who you know, I've been married 43 years, when her father died, I did not go to the funeral with her. That's how the game has changed, and for the better, obviously, because we're a society now who cares more about family and thinks more about family first, and that's the way it should be before the game, because after all, it is a game.
Were you not allowed to go? Did you ask to go, or did you not even think of asking?
I didn't even think about asking, Andy, because at that time, with one-year contracts and me being new in the big leagues, we were always afraid for our job. There was always somebody on your heels who would take your job if the Wally Pipp story, Lou Gehrig taking Wally Pipp's job and him never getting a job back. That's what you're worried about. And back then, of course, the salaries were different. You weren't making a lot of money. You wanted to get your time in the big leagues to get your pension. You just were always afraid that there was somebody on your heels, and there always was. At least for me, I wasn't a star. I was a journeyman player who was fortunate enough to play 10 years, mainly because I was on great Royals teams. When you're a small piece of a great team, it's a lot easier to stay 10 years.
Well, give yourself a little credit, Duke. You played a long time, and you lasted a long time, and it wasn't just because they needed somebody there. You played a role, and you had a job, and you did a good job at it. And
well, I appreciate that, Andy. But, I played part-time some years, and I played full-time some years. But I was very new to the big leagues when that particular incident happened, and Nancy's father passed away. And she understood. I still feel bad that I didn't go to this day, and I should have gone for a couple of days with her to give her support. But it's just the way it was back then. Nobody left for the birth of the babies. I shouldn't say nobody. You did occasionally, but they didn't have the paternity leave like they do today.
Well, let me ask this question. We're in a situation that's interesting with sports, and this is where I wanted to go with this, not just speaking about this specific incident, but if we take the whole issue of sports and family today, you have 7 grandchildren, as you said. I'm sure they're all playing sports as they're getting older. Your sons both and daughter played sports. You had to balance being a baseball player and being around them, watching them play, getting at games. We've gotten to the point now with sports that there is an athletic event on every day. It doesn't matter if it's New Year's Day, Christmas Day, Independence Day, Labor Day. That doesn't matter. There's always something. And right. I think we've gotten to a point, especially with youth sports, where it's almost gotten out of hand. And I recall in a story I want to share with our listeners, and joining me is former Royals great John Wathan with us this morning as we're talking about family and sports. Several years ago when my sons were playing elite level soccer, they had a tournament. They were each on 2 separate teams that played in a tournament over Mother's Day up in Topeka. And I thought it was, wrong to be playing a Mother's Day tournament. But nonetheless, we played in it, and our coach says, no, you have to be there, and if you don't come to the tournament, you'll be penalized and you won't play in the next tournament. Mm-hmm. Well, we were off that team after that. Pretty much the season ended not much later after that, and we quit. I had a real issue with that. It's Mother's Day. We wanted to spend time with their mothers and grandmothers for both families, and yet we had to be at the soccer tournament till 3 in the afternoon. By the time we got back here to town, went to dinner, they were both exhausted. I think we've gotten to a point now where sports almost takes over, in terms of what's more important, sports or family. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I've seen the same thing with my kids and my grandkids where my wife, of course, with me being gone all the time in baseball for all those years, I'm fortunate enough now to be able to kind of do my own schedule and not miss as many things with my kids and grandkids. But it's really changed in the way that, obviously when a kid plays baseball, the coach wants him to play year-round. When a kid plays basketball year-round, football, whatever. And it's very hard for kids to play a lot of different sports now. And that's the thing that I think is wrong. I think kids should have the opportunity to play different sports and play different positions while we're on it too, because sometimes a coach in baseball or whatever sport will put a kid at shortstop and that's all he plays for the next 6 straight years. Not being able to see, and we've talked about this before, not being able to see if he might be a better second baseman, catcher, outfielder, pitcher, whatever. But they stick him and they stereotype him as he's our shortstop. Well, if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to play 10 years probably in the big leagues because I was able to play some outfield, first base, and catcher. I love moving around. But getting back to the dates and the different holidays where they're playing, I don't quite get it. Some of these tournaments, teams, and luckily my son Derek, who's involved coaching his son right now, Knox, who's 9, I believe, and he tells some of the parents sometimes, we're going to have a team, but we're going to have some time off. We're not going to do tournaments every week. We're going to have a league schedule, and we're going to do a couple of tournaments. And this is the way it's going to be. And I think sometimes they get involved with the winning aspect so doggone much that they don't care. The parents are just interested in getting the kids into high school and playing on a high school team and getting a college scholarship and playing professional ball. Talking to some people about all these tournaments these kids play as they get older and the travel teams and the competition teams and the perfect games and all that. Some of these parents, in order to get their kids a baseball scholarship, sacrifice so much with their travel, actually spend $20,000 or $30,000.
Well, I was just going to say, what about the money they're spending as well? I mean, it's
20. I've heard $20,000-$30,000 a year with the travel and with the hotels and with the meals and with the cost of the tournament. So it's kind of getting out of hand big time. And I don't agree with it. There's not much that John Wathan can do to change it or Andy Jacobs, but that's just the way it is today. But you have to find a team, I guess, that cares more about family than they do about the games.
Well, I think, I'll disagree with you a little bit because I think I think there is some impact you and I and everybody can have, and that's by standing up for yourself. And a great example, I write a newsletter every month on my website, which is winnersunlimited.com, and I wrote it about this weekend. And I got a response from a lady who told me her son is in the high school varsity track team, and over spring break, they had a trip planned to go down actually to Arizona for spring training, a family trip. Well, the track coach said that they had to come to practice. It was mandatory to be at practice over spring break. If they weren't at that practice, they would not be able to compete in the first meet. So her son said that he wanted to be at this meet badly enough. He didn't want to go to spring training to their vacation they'd had planned for months. So the mom canceled the trip. He stayed home and he trained. And then the coach for the first meet said they had to cancel the first meet because so many kids didn't come to practice over spring break. They didn't have enough kids on the team to compete, so they said they were going to cancel the first meet. And this mom was livid that they gave up their break for what the coach said was mandatory, yet all these other kids didn't do it, and he let them go. So I think we've gotten to a point now where I think she said in the future she's going to stand up and say, you know what, family comes first. And I think that's where parents can play a role. I think if you're going to join a team, obviously you need to participate in the games and everything. But if there's in the preseason meeting, and I always encourage people to have a preseason meeting. In that meeting, you should talk about the schedules, and if there's a conflict, you need to bring it up. And I think coaches need to be understanding enough that if you have a player that has a family conflict or a family activity that they want to be in, you should let that kid go. I mean, don't you agree with that?
I agree 100%. I think sometimes what happens too, Andy, and you've seen this, I'm sure, if it's one of the better kids, the coach might have to be a little more lenient and say, sure, you can miss a day. But if it's a kid that's a borderline kid or a kid that's not an impact player for that team, he might not have the same ability to miss a game as somebody that is one of their best players. If there's a choice to be made between a really good player and he said, let's say he's playing basketball and football, and they said, well, I've got a football game that's important to me, and the basketball coach says, well, yeah, you can go. because he's one of the better players. But if it's another player that's not such a good player, he might say, no, you can't go. You got to pick one or the other. So it's a double-edged sword, I think, sometimes with some of these sports and some of these coaches.
Well, and that's where I think the bottom line comes down to this. And if you have a child on a team, you are still the parent. You are still the person who's in charge of that child. It's not the coach. And I think I had a young man I worked with last summer in my office, and get your thought on this before we go to commercial break. You can stick around for one more segment, can't you?
Sure.
Okay. I have a young
what
man.
What else am I going to do this early in the morning, huh?
Yeah, I do it every week, my friend. You sound pretty good. I'm glad Nancy let you get up this morning and do this. Okay, I had this young man who's 8 years old, and he was on a team that played 100 games last summer. And that's crazy. I just the parents brought him in, and they have quit that team. The coach was livid about the fact you had to go to all these tournaments. They traveled all over the Midwest. There's no reason for an 8-year-old kid to be playing 100 baseball games during the summer.
No. Matter of fact, I know there are some Legion programs, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that play 60 games in about a 2-month span with doubleheaders and everything else, and they don't even have time to practice, which I've always disagreed with. I think practice is very important to learn the fundamentals of the game. You do learn in game situations, but you also need to practice as well. So it happens at all age levels, but especially younger ones, I think that's crazy.
Yeah, well, it's an issue, and we'll keep talking about it. Joining me this morning is former Royals manager, John Wathan, and we're going to come back after this commercial segment and take your calls. I'd like to hear from you. We're talking about the role of family in sports. And we'd like to hear from you. Have you had a conflict with a coach before about your son or daughter playing in a game when there's been a family event going on? This is in response to comments made in New York this week by Mike Francesa and Boomer Esiason, talk show hosts, criticizing Mets second baseman Daniel Murphy for taking a couple days off to be with his wife at the birth of his first child. Let's get your thoughts on that. If you are a parent, if you're a coach, how do you feel about taking time off for a game or missing a game for a family event? If you have a tournament you're playing and you've got a wedding, a bar mitzvah, something going on over the weekend that your kids need to be at, how do you feel as a coach about those kids taking time off, as the parents about that? Our phone number is 913-381-810. 913-381-810. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. Joining me, former Royals great John Wathan. Give us a call. Let's get some comments. Let's see what you have to say. We're on the leader in sports, Sports Radio 10 WHB.
Behind me is the all-new Canadian Dodge Durango. It's got it all, including a maple syrup-resistant glove box and 12.4 capulls.
Yeah, just crack it on the side. Boom.
Capills. Kipples.
Take it like this.
Kilometers per liter. Kilometers per litre. I don't know what you want. I don't read Canadian.
Good morning, everyone. I am sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. Welcome to our show here in Sports Radio 810 WHB and 810WHB.com. Joining me this morning is former Royals great John Wathan. And Duke, thank you so much for getting up early, joining me this morning. We're talking about the role of family in sports, and this is in response to comments made by talk show host in New York Mike Francesa and Boomer Esiason, who criticized Mets second baseman Daniel Murphy for taking 2 days off to be at the birth of his son. Francesca still is saying that, he backs up his comment, saying it was wrong for him to take time off. He should have hired a nurse to be there. I mean, what? I was there at the birth of both of my sons. I would not trade those moments for anything. I mean, Duke, what about you? Were you there when your 3 kids were born?
Actually, I was in Jacksonville in AA when Dusty was born, and I missed Dina's birth by an hour. I tried my hardest to get home from spring training. We tried to induce labor before I left. It didn't work. And once again, like I talked about earlier, fearful for your job. Back then you didn't know if you were going to be on the team or not from year to year. You didn't have the large multi-year contract. So I missed Dina's birth by an hour, and Derek's I was in the off season in December, so I was there for his. So 2 out of 3, I guess.
So you just hit on something right there. Fearful for your job. Fearful for our place on the team. If we miss the game, if we miss the tournament, we're not going to be on the team. We're going to be penalized. And that's why I'd like to get some calls. Yeah, let's see if we can get some calls in here. Our phone number is 913-3810810. Joining me is John Wathan, former Royals manager, Royals great player. And we'd like to hear from you. If you are a parent and your son or daughter is on a team or has been on a team, and you had a family event, family activity, something going on where they needed to miss a practice or a game, and they got penalized for that. I'd like to hear from you what your thoughts were on that. What did you do? Our phone number is 913-3810810. If you are a coach, what is your policy about kids missing practices or games? And John, the worst is probably basketball. My TV producer Jim Bly's in here, and during the break he was mentioning to me that with basketball tournaments, he has a daughter that's played. Basketball starts in November and goes to March. You've got the Thanksgiving holiday, you've got the Christmas and New Year's holidays going on, and there are all these tournaments over the Christmas holidays. I know when do families get together? Usually during the holiday period. I don't understand how a lot of these teams have these tournaments going on over the holiday period, and kids get penalized for that. Have you ever had to deal with something like that before?
When my kids were playing, for the most part, Andy, I was playing as well and gone either on the road managing or playing, so I didn't have to deal with Nancy, bless her heart, was both mother and father for so many years with me traveling all the time. So she dealt with it. We had an old Chevy van, and she'd throw the kids in there and go to the tournament wherever it was and hang out all day and come home. So I never had to deal with it a lot. I had another thought, not to change the subject, but I wonder about Esiason and Francesca, their comments. Had that been the middle of the season, the Mets were 15 games out of first place, I wonder if they would have made those comments. It just so happens that it was the start of the season, correct? The first and second game of the season, I believe, that he missed.
Right.
Or maybe just one game. Was it 1 or 2 he missed?
He missed 2 games.
Yeah. But had that been, in the middle of the season, there probably wouldn't have been the uproar. They could have got away with it or not even said it. They probably wouldn't have even mentioned it.
What if the Mets were in a pennant race and he'd done that?
Oh yeah, then it would have been big news, just like the opening of the season, the first and second game, big time. So I think a lot of it has to do with parents, with how big the tournament and how good their son is or their daughter.
So let's say your child isn't the best. All right, he or she is on a team. They're not the best player on that team. You've got a family activity, a big family get together coming up. You get on the baseball team, you make the team in February, and the team starts playing. And in July, in the middle of the season, you've got this family activity on a weekend. You're scared to say something to the coach because you don't want to jeopardize your son's place on the team. What would you do if that was you? What would you do?
I don't know. That's a good question. I always left it up to my kids. I always told my kids, it's funny because I didn't want my kids to play baseball because of me. So I said, if you want to play the violin, if you want to be an attorney, a doctor, if you want to play in the band, the speech club, speech team at school, whatever you want to do it. You have to have a passion for what you do. I've always had a huge passion for baseball. And it just so happened because I always told my kids that, they ended up wanting to play baseball. I think I kind of downplayed the fact that, you can play if you want. I don't care, whatever you want to do. Rather than I grew up without a father in San Diego, and so I watched fathers very, very closely as a kid, and I saw a lot of fathers who push their kids into sports. You got to play this, you got to do this, you got to practice this, go out and practice, you got to go shoot hoops, you got to go work on your hitting, your bunting, whatever. And I saw kids push so much into sports that I thought to myself at that time, not growing up with a father, that if I ever had that opportunity to be a father, I wasn't going to be like that, because I saw a lot of kids, we've talked about this before on the show, that were turned off, didn't want to play, were burned out by the time they were in high school. So I think it was a little bit different with me. It was like, whatever you guys want to do, that's great. And because of that, they both ended up playing pro baseball, I think, because that's what they wanted to do. They were around it all the time in the locker room as kids with me. And it's a little different situation probably with me than a lot of parents.
Well, as you know, I've spent many years with the Royals at two different times, and spent time working with you when you were the manager, and I always appreciated you. One of the things about you, and I remember this about you, you said one of the things you wanted me to do when I work with you as a team psychologist is try and get the players to all come talk to you. And I remember several players, I had to basically push them into your office, but they did, because they were always scared to talk to you, not because of you, but because you were the authority figure.
Right. I had an open door policy that really wasn't an open door, because they were still afraid to come in there and talk about it. I think what happens a lot of time with, believe it or not, with professional athletes or with anybody in the business world coming to talk to their boss, they are sometimes afraid of what the boss's answer is going to be to their question. If you're afraid of the answer and your boss is truthful, that's one reason they might not want to come in and talk to you. I always told them, if you come into my office, open door policy, just don't be afraid of the answer you might get when you ask the question.
Well, and that brings up this whole issue of fear. I think a lot of people, and people who have kids who play sports, are afraid, I think, to say anything to an authority figure. Well, he's the coach. Oh, we better do what the coach says. Well, the coach says you can't miss practice. I had a young lady that was a cheerleader who made her, as an 8th grader, made the high school cheerleading squad. Was all excited about it. She'd been a cheerleader all her life. Tries out in 8th grade for the high school team, makes the varsity team. After she makes the varsity team, the coach has a meeting with the squad and says, all right, here are our rules. Missing practice, missing games is not allowed. The only time you can miss something is if you're in the hospital. If you're sick, if you have a fever, you have to be here. You cannot miss. Mm-hmm. So this girl is in a quandary, because over the Christmas holiday break was her grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and they'd planned a cruise to go on for their entire family. So she went to her parents and said, what am I going to do? So the mom calls the coach and tells the coach what's going on. The coach says, well, your daughter's off the team. She goes, what do you mean my daughter's off the team? You can't be gone a whole week. I can't have a girl be gone, because it's my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, because I don't care what it is. They went to the athletic director of the school, to the district athletic director. Wouldn't do anything. They ended up transferring. The girl ended up going to a different school and made the cheerleading squad at this other school. And the coach said, "Go be with your family. That's more important." I think that to me is where we've gotten to the point with sports today, where it almost takes over everything. And I think that's where I think it's important that we do, as parents, as grandparents, put our foot down and at the beginning of a season say, you know what, we have a conflict in the July tournament. We're going to be gone that weekend. And even if your child is the best or isn't the best, I think it's your responsibility as a parent to stand up for yourself. Duke, what are the odds of someone making a Major League Baseball team when they're 6? I mean, what are the chances when you start playing baseball at 6 you're going to be a Major League Baseball player?
Probably about, I'm guessing 2 or 3%. I know just getting in the minor leagues is out of high school or college is probably 8 to 10%. And then once you get in the minor leagues, we have 180 to 200 players in our minor leagues, and probably only about, 5% will ever get the big leagues. And it's very, very slim, obviously, in any professional sports. And I think a lot of parents are kidding themselves when they think they're going to spend all this money and they're going to get their kid the opportunity to play professional baseball. And it doesn't happen very often. It's tough.
I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. Joining me this morning is former Royals manager and Royals great John Wathan. Excuse me. We'd like to take your calls. We're talking about the role of family in sports. We haven't anybody calling yet. We'd like to hear from you. If you are a coach and you have a young man or woman on your team who has a conflict with one of your games or tournaments or practices, what's your philosophy about them missing that? Do you have a philosophy that says they can't miss games or practices? If you are a parent and you have had a child on a team where there's a big tournament going on and you're going to be gone for that, How do you handle that situation? Do you not go to that family event? Do you let your child play in the game? Or do you say, hey, coach, sorry, we're not going to be here, and it may jeopardize our spot in the team? Our phone number is 913-381-810. Great chance to talk to John Wathan right now. He'll be with us for a few more minutes before we let him go. 913-381-810 is our number. If you're a coach and you've had this conflict, what if you're an athlete? What if you have played a sport and you have been, the season gets started and you realize your brother's getting married on a weekend in June and it's a big tournament and you're a big part of the team? What do you do? Do you skip the wedding, or do you tell the coach I'm going to be gone? How do you handle that situation? Once again, 913-381-810. Now, John, you obviously have been with the Royals for almost all your careers, sometime with Boston and the Angels. You and I both know Dayton Moore very well. We both respect him immensely. I know Dayton puts family first above everything else. He coaches his son Robert's team, I believe, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Okay, Dayton, I think this is an important facet of everything. And when I worked with the team, I admire Dayton Moore immensely, because I think he puts family first and thinks that's an important component. It wasn't last year. Didn't Salvador Perez have to leave because I think his grandmother died? Wasn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so he wasn't penalized for being gone. In fact, I think he was gone for about a week, wasn't he?
He was actually gone a couple more days than the bereavement list allows. I think he was docked a couple days of pay, but I think he was gone. I think they give you a week, and he might have been gone 9 days, something like that. But Dayton is very much a family guy, Andy, and he cares more about family. That's the first thing he says when he talks to the team in spring training, talks to our minor leagues. Take care of your family. Your family is first. Baseball is going to go by the wayside after a number of years, maybe 1 or 2 years. But your family is always going to be there. They are number one. Take care of them. And, something you mentioned at the start of the show about Ewing Kauffman, he was the same way, as you mentioned. I can remember, he called all of his employees associates, regardless of whether they were custodians at his office or upper management. They were all associates, and he called the Royals people, players, front office people, grounds crew, whatever, his associates when he owned the Royals. And I think that's the type of attitude that we're talking about here, not only with employees, but with family. And those vibes are felt by employees. If you treat somebody as family, and family is important, like Dayton Moore, everybody, why do you think all the people that we have working for us now came over from the Braves when Dayton came over? Because of Dayton Moore, they came over here, and they know what kind of person he is and how he cares about people, and that's the reason we have a great number of people that have come over from the Braves and are working with the Royals today, because they knew Dayton Moore and what kind of person and what he stood for when they worked for him with the Braves. So if you have, so before we let you go here, let me ask this one more question, and I'm talking to John Wathan, former Royals manager. If you are your son or daughter is going to try out for their team, their sports team. It's soccer, baseball, basketball. It doesn't matter what sport. Tryouts are coming on, and it's an elite level team. It's a premier team, and your son or daughter's pretty good. They're going to try out for some teams, and you've got a team where the coach's philosophy is pretty much, you have to be at all the practices, you have to be at all the games. You've got a conflict that's going to come on during the year. As a parent, what's the best way to handle that? What would you suggest from your perspective? What would you suggest to that parent about that? Well, I think what you said earlier was huge. You need to have a meeting with that coach, and the coach, if he's smart, should have a meeting at the beginning of the year and tell him and tell the rest of the parents what their philosophies are, what our philosophy is about missing games. And if it's a coach that says absolutely not, you're not going to play the following week if you miss a game, I don't care where you're going with your family vacation or what's going on, I think I'd think about getting on another team. I think it's very important to have that preseason meeting to know exactly where your coach stands. So when something does come up unexpectedly, it might not be a planned trip. It might be something like we've talked about before, a death in the family or something, and certainly today it's a more sensitive society, and most people realize that you need to go to funerals, and something like that happens, heaven forbid, that you're going to miss a game or two, especially at a kid's level. I mean, obviously. So just to have communication, you have to keep the communication lines open between the parents and the coach, so you know exactly what that coach is like. And if he goes against what he says originally early in the season about missing games, I'd look for another team. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think, John, one thing you just said there before I let you go is this.
it's just a game.
Yes.
It's a game. It's not life. It's a moment in time, and I think you will remember the personal event, the family event, much more so than you will remember that game. It'll be another game in the season, but that's a very important thing. I wouldn't have missed either of my sons' births for anything, and it didn't matter where I was. I would have been there. I was there. I would have been there no matter what. As with you, you did everything you could do to be at your kids' births, and so I think family should always come first. John Wathan, my friend, thanks for getting up this morning, joining me this morning. If people see you out the stadium, say hi to you, and tell Dayton and I said hi when you see him out there today. I appreciate it.
I will, Andy. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, my friend. You take care of yourself, and I owe you a lunch for this, so you get in touch with me.
Okay, buddy.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Okay, that was former Royals manager of Royals great John Wathan joining us this morning here on Sports Radio 10 WHB. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm going to come back. I want to get some calls in here. I want to hear from you. If you are a parent and you have had a conflict with a family event during your son or daughter's sports season, how did you handle that situation? Did you say something to the coach? Did you say, sorry, that your son or daughter, they'll go to the game, they'll go to the tournament, they won't be at the family event? How do you deal with that? 913-381-0810 is the number. And John Wathan hit it on the head. It's about fear. When he was a player, back when he played in the 70s and early 80s, this was his profession, it was his livelihood, is how he made his money. He was afraid to say anything. He missed his wife's father's funeral because he was afraid of possibly losing his job. Still bothers him to this day, years later. All right. So how important is that family event? And this is in response to Mike Francesa and Boomer Esiason, the New York sports talk show hosts, who made the critical comments of Mets second baseman Daniel Murphy for missing 2 games at the beginning of the season to be with his wife when she had their first baby. He was criticized for being with his wife at the birth of their son. I want to get your thoughts on this. No one's called up yet this morning, so I'd like to hear from you. If you're a parent, if you're a coach, if you're an athlete, let's see what you have to say. Our number is 913-381-0810. Have you had this conflict before? How'd you handle it? How'd you deal with it? I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. We're on the Leader in Sports, Sports Radio 10 WHB.
Behind me is the all-new Canadian Dodge Durango. It's got it all, including a maple syrup-resistant glove box and 12.4 capulls.
Yeah, just cracking on the side. Boom.
Capills. Kipples.
Take like this.
Kilometers per liter. Kilometers per litre. I don't know what you want. I don't read Canadian.
Good morning, everyone. I am sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm here every Sunday morning here on Sports Radio 810 WHB and 810WHB.com. This is the Sports Psychology Hour. I want to thank my guest, John Wathan, who joined us this first 2 segments of the show this morning. Some good comments, good advice. If you're a parent or you're a coach, hopefully you can follow some of that. And you can always listen to us. Our shows are podcasted on 810WHB and 810WHB.com, 810WHB TV. You can watch replays of the show. And if you have a coach who maybe you don't agree with all the time about some of their philosophies about requirements for being at practice in terms of skipping family events, man, encourage them to listen to the show. We've been talking about comments this morning that New York talk show host Mike Francesa and Boomer Esiason made for making fun of Daniel Murphy, the Mets second baseman, for taking 2 days off to be at the birth of his son. And I'd like to hear from you. Like I said, we haven't had any calls yet this morning. I'd like to hear from you. If you are a coach, what is your philosophy about kids missing games or practices for family events? Do you have a penalty that you impose? If they miss something, do you penalize them for that? Our phone number is 913-381-0810. I'd like to hear from you. If you are a parent, I know a lot of parents listen to this show. I get comments all the time. If you are a mom or dad, or maybe a grandparent, and your child has to miss a game because you have a family event planned, do you say, well, I guess we better go to the game, it's more important, or is the family event more important? Now, we all know family events should be more important, but unfortunately, some people out there think sports is more important than anything else. Our phone number here is 913-381-0810. 913-381-0810 is the number. I'd like to hear from you. If you are an athlete, did you ever miss a family event, an important family event, because you were scared of losing your place on the team if you skipped that game or that practice? Once again, 913-381-0810 is the number. And I want to go back to the cheerleader I mentioned earlier when I was talking with John Wathan. This young lady was 8th grade, makes her high school cheerleading team, and then is told she cannot be on the team because she's going to be gone over the Christmas holidays on a cruise with her grandparents for their 50th wedding anniversary. If you were a parent, what would you have done in that situation? Would you have said, well, I guess she'll have to stay home and be on the team, or would you say, no, she's coming with us? How would you handle that situation? 913-381-0810 is the number. I think family should be the priority, and it doesn't matter if you're a coach, if you're an athlete, if you're a parent, whatever. I think family should come first, and I think it should always be the primary, most important issue. I think later in life you're going to remember that important family event in contrast to skipping that game. There'll always be another game. There's always going to be another athletic event to go to. And I think, if it's the state championship or something like that, maybe if it's a game of that importance, of that magnitude, maybe you say, well, we're going to have to be at that. But if it's a game during the season, a tournament in the season, if you've got a 10-year-old playing softball and there's a game that's coming up, but you've got a family event and you know that's going to be going on, you just tell the coach, hey, you know what, we're not going to be there. And if the coach doesn't agree with you, like John Wathan said earlier, I agree with him, then you have to say, is this a team we really want to be on? I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. You can follow me on Twitter at DRJ Sports Psych, at DRJ SPORTPSYCH. Follow me there. Sign up for my monthly newsletter on my website, winnersunlimited.com. And I'd like to hear from you. I think this is an important topic, and I think these talk show hosts in New York are fools. Mike Francesa has no business criticizing someone for being at the birth of his son. And, it makes me question what kind of a parent is he. I didn't do any research to find out if he's a father, if he's married, whatever. But I can't fathom why somebody would be criticized for something like that. Let's see what Steve has to say. Steve, good morning. How are you, sir?
Well, good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Okay, get your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts are this. I've had two families. I got a 42-year-old son. I got a 13-year-old son placed on a major competitive team. And I think that the team meetings and all those things that you're talking about absolutely have to be held. But like in life, you've got to make a choice, and you don't get it both ways. Now, for the birth of a baby or the death of a parent, that's one thing. But the cheerleader or the teams, it's not fair to the people that do it. So I think that you got to be in the middle. But if you have a job, I mean, you go to school, you're a doctor, you're a heart surgeon, you got a family event planned, and you don't have any, but you have to, you make a commitment. And I think that's the problem with our world right now. The commitment doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything in marriage. It doesn't mean anything in sports. You've got these kids that in schools that the teachers can't, they can't discipline anybody. We got all this politically correctness when common sense and everything went out of the rules. So
and I agree with you on that, Steve, totally on that. But I think when it comes to family, though, when it comes to a family event that's an important family event, and basically there's two things. You've got something planned in advance. Okay, something like the cheerleader that made the cheerleading team in April. The cruise was in December. And I don't think there was any reason for that coach to say you can't go on that cruise. It wouldn't hurt the team if she's not there, especially over the Christmas holidays. So to me, what do you think of that? You don't agree with that?
Well, sure I do, but take that farther. So you go to school, you get your master's, you got to hold a deal, your 50th wedding anniversary, and you're supposed to be making a presentation to a big client in New York. I mean, I just think the precedent's wrong. I think you need to instill in these children, hey, you make a commitment, you follow the commitment, but you don't get it both ways. You've got to give some up. And
well, if you've got a wedding anniversary coming up, I think you don't set up that meeting with the client at that time.
Well,
I mean, you see what I'm saying? I mean, if when your wedding anniversary is going to be, Steve.
I hear what you're saying. I'm hearing what you're saying, but if I'm a coach trying to put together a program, or I'm an employer trying to either make money for myself or the stockholders or for whatever, and I say these are the rules. We have vacation, we have whatever, but the commitment to me,
where's the commitment go then, to the family or to the job? And that's where, to me, I think it starts. There's two things going on here. If you have an event that's planned, when your wedding anniversary is going to be, approximately when a child's going to be born, when there's a specific family event that's going to happen, you plan that out. That you let people know you're working with, this is going on, I'm going to need this time off. Okay. I mean, those are things. Now, a death or something like that, if you can't take time off to be at a funeral for a loved one, then you got to question, do I really want to work for this? You talk about commitment. In the end, Steve, what's more important?
I think there's two different issues. I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. I think there's two issues, though. Versus a family, versus a child, or a death, or those kinds of things. Absolutely, you're right. But when you start the season and the coach says, look, this is our plan, this is what we're going to do, and then you say you want to go on a cruise, and the coach says, well, fine, find another team, that's just like an employer say, I understand, but you made a commitment, I made a commitment to you, and you don't get it both ways.
Okay,
so
but
I'll support your choice.
Just saying we're just going to go on a cruise is one thing, but if you say it's my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, it's 9 months from now, it's been planned for 2 years, that's a whole different situation. I think in that situation, how much longer your grandparents are going to be around. Steve, good call, good comments. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Let's see what Mike has to say. Mike, good morning, sir. How are you?
Hi, good. I'm good. I think I guess I agree with you more than the last caller there. There's more to life than whatever sport that you're doing. And, if you're talking about kids, sometimes in their life they don't have any control over what happens. I mean, who does really have a lot of control over what happens in your life? But kids especially, parents have other responsibilities as well. When they make a commitment, that's wonderful, and I'm sure that they plan to honor that commitment. But life happens,
and that's what, Mike, you hit it on the head. Life happens.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's it's sort of like Forrest Gump's great bumper sticker, which we can't say on the air. Blank happens, but yeah, I mean, it does. And the fact of the matter is, things are going to occur, and in my opinion, if a family event is going on, that should take priority over anything. I don't care what you're doing. And like our last caller said, well, you've got a big presentation, but it's your wedding anniversary. Well, you knew when your wedding anniversry is going to be. Say, I'm sorry, I can't be there that day.
And that's an adult, too, not a child.
So let me ask this question. Do you have kids?
Yes, I do.
Okay, how old are they?
14 and 12.
All right. Have you had this conflict yet? Has something like this come up for you?
I'm a coach, and I've had this conflict.
Okay, and what happened, and what did you do?
I told the player and the player's parents, you know, there's more to life. I coach basketball. There's more to life than basketball. I said I would like you there at the game, but if you can't make it, I understand. You know, do what you make the call. It's your choice.
But do you have a preseason meeting, Mike?
I told them at the beginning of the year that you know, I want you at every practice. I want you at every game. I mean, this is what I want.
But but do you say at the beginning of the year, yeah, I'd like you at all these practices and games, but if there's a conflict or something comes up, I want to know about it now, or let me know in advance?
Yeah, I do. I want communication from the parents. That's what I want. I want the parents to, and not the child. I want the parents to tell me, hey, we have something planned. We're going to be gone this time. I'm great with that. That's fine as long as I know beforehand. I don't, no coach likes, or most people don't like to go into something and then find out suddenly that, hey, I don't have 3 players or whatever it is. You just don't like that.
Well,
so,
and I can understand if you set up at the beginning of the season in your preseason meeting these guidelines, and then you have a parent come to you on Tuesday and you've got a weekend tournament going on. Oh, by the way, we have a family trip planned for this weekend.
Yeah.
We're not going to be here. Now, that's a situation where I think then, do you discipline the kids? Probably you do. Okay,
Yeah.
because then the parents need to, hey, you've had this plan for months. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a different situation. And
Yeah,
I think that's what our previous caller was getting into. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I bench them. Yeah, I bench them. I sit them on the bench because it's too late. How can you do this to me?
All right,
Yeah, I
Mike, thank you.
understand that.
Yeah, well, listen, thank you for your call this morning, sir. I appreciate it. You have a great day. All right, I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs here every Sunday morning from 7 8 a.m. This is the Sports Psychology Hour. If you'd like to get a hold of me, once again, you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter address is at DRJSPORTPSYCH, at Dr. J Sports Psych. You can sign up for my monthly newsletter. Follow me there at my website, which is winnersunlimited.com. Check out my CDs on relaxation and visualization that I have on there. And you can get a hold of me at my office. If you have a young person you'd like to see with me, you want to work with me, take on new clients, my number is 816-561-5556, 816-561-5556. I am sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs, and we're on the Leader in Sports, Sports Radio 810 WHB and 810WHB.com.